So we are taking certain technical aptitude questions in software design and implementation. Multiple choice questions we are going to take first. Match each lifecycle model with its definition by drawing a line connecting them. So these are four options and these are to be matched. Please read them very carefully and try to answer. Let me tell you the answer. The answer is this. Code and fix means write some code, debug it, and repeat. This is ad hoc. So code and fix, ad hoc. Next is evolutionary typing, prototyping. What is this? Evolutionary prototyping means build an initial small requirement specification, code it, evolve the specification again, and code as needed with respect to this evolved specification. C. Spiral. We're going to match it with the A. Assess risk at each step and do most critical action first. Most critical action first. Stage delivery. D. Will match it with this option, C option. D with C. We build initial requirement specification for several releases. We build initial requirement specification for several releases, then divide and code each in sequence. Finally, we are left with waterfall. So this will be matched with none other than our waterfall. Standard phases, required design, code, test in order. In this order. A windowing system uses the notion of damage for what purpose? Can you answer this? The answer is, because let me tell you first, damage is used to improve efficiency. Damage is used to improve efficiency, so it will be perfectly legal but slow to redraw the entire window. That is, the windowing scheme you're drawing the window on the entire screen whenever any part of the display changes or becomes visible. But damage indicates exactly what parts need to be redrawn. So our answer would be to improve the efficiency. Which of the following are appropriate for a requirements document? Circle all that apply. Which of the following are appropriate for requirements document? Please try to answer this. The answer is first one, third one, and the fourth one. That is, multiple users will be able to log on without experiencing conflicts or slow load times. Appropriate. If the system detects a major issue, it will save state and restart. Then the D, the user will be able to modify the location of program's save location on their machine. Why is it valuable to formally compare two specifications to one another? Why is it valuable to formally compare two specifications with one another? The answer is, these are options for you. Please try to answer. Let's read all of these options carefully. The answer is B and C. Why is it valuable to formally compare two specifications to one another? Because to determine whether an ADT is a true subtype of another, then to determine whether a procedure satisfying one can be substituted from the procedure satisfying the another. These are the two options. An illegal argument exception must be thrown when? Illegal argument exception. The answer is none of the above. So all of these, whether it be a non-null parameter violates at the rate required clause of the, that means required clause of the method, or a null parameter violates the at the rate requires clause of the method, and the object state is inappropriate for method invocation. No, none of the above. When is overloading resolved? Overloading. You know about overloading? When is overloading resolved? Overloading is resolved at compile time. Okay? You might have heard about function overloading or say operator overloading. These are resolved at the compile time. You might have heard about virtual functions that is used for runtime polymorphism. So those things are resolved at runtime. Overloading is resolved based on what information? Overloading. These are options for you. The answer is declared types. Declared types. Next is when is overriding resolved? Not overloading, but overriding. Of course, at runtime. Overriding, if you have a function in the base class, and then you have a derived class, you have a function here, same say fun, you again have a function here. So which functions need to be called? That is done at the runtime. Overriding is resolved based on what information? The answer is runtime types, which are Object classes. Object classes. What should you do first when a bug is reported to you? What are you going to do? Options. The answer is you have to reproduce the bug first. Right? Reproduce. Now let us take certain true and false type questions. When reasoning about use of ADT, it is permissible to ignore the code? The answer is true. Yes. When reasoning about uses of an ADT, it is permissible to ignore the code. When reasoning about uses of an ADT, is it permissible to ignore the observers? This is also true. When two MDTs, that is module dependency diagrams, even two MDTs we have been provided, the one with the fewer edges is better. This is generally true, but is not guaranteed. The answer is false. List integer is a true subtype of list number. Is it true or false? The answer is false. No specification. It can be anything. A number can be floating type also. Regular specification fields are used for values represented by a concentric field in the implementation, and derived specification fields are used for values with no representation as a concrete field in the implementation. The answer is false. This statement is false. For each concrete field in the implementation, there should be a specification field of certain variety in the abstraction. Yes, the answer is false. It's not true. When a client calls a method without meeting the preconditions, the method must throw the exception that is stated in the specification. Is it true or false? The answer is false. If S1, that is the specification, is a stronger specification than S2, then any implementation that satisfies S1 must also satisfy S2. Is it true or false? The answer is true. If an ADT is immutable, then its representation cannot change. False. The abstract value may not change, but the representation may change. An example is benevolent side effects. A rep invariant may be satisfied by a concrete state, that is a value of the field that cannot occur at runtime. By cannot occur, we mean that there is no sequence of method calls and field assignments that will produce that concrete state. Is it true or false? The answer is yes. It's absolutely true. The rep invariant is part of an ADT specification. True or false? False. The abstraction function is a part of an ADT specification. False. Derived specification fields are part of ADT specification. True. Derived specification are. In order to instantiate a class, it must have at least one public constructor. False. We have certain questions now. We just consider that two specifications are there, S1 and S2, and S1 is stronger than S2. So S1 may have a weaker, easier to satisfy required clause than S2. True or false? It may be true. S1 may have stronger, harder to satisfy required clause than S2. This is false. Because in these two, S1 is stronger than S2. S1 may have fewer items in its modifies clause than S2. True. S1 can have more items in its modifies clause than S2. False. S1 may have weaker, easier to satisfy effects clause than S2. False. Just these two questions will answer that. S1 may have stronger, harder to satisfy effect clause than S2. This is true. When specification testing, it is good practice, but not required, to check that runtime exception is thrown when invalid input is passed to a method. False. In representation invariant RI, this is guaranteed to hold for a correct implementation of immutable and immutable abstraction when no method in the class is executed. True. The representation invariant is guaranteed to hold for a correct implementation of a mutable abstraction when no method in the class is executing. True or false? True. It is a violation of the abstraction barrier for a class to directly use fields of its superclass. This is false. When the internal state of an object changes, its hash code must also change. Important question. False. It should not change. A method may throw an exception if and only if the exception is listed in the throws class or clause of the method specification. False. It may not always be true. A good black box test should be designed to cover every branch of the code because any untested code might harbor bugs. False. Black box test should not consider the implementation, only the specification. In black box, we do two things prominently. We make first equivalence classes, and then we do after making the equivalence classes, we do the boundary value analysis. A class that represents a Cartesian point should include a method to compute the x and y coordinate, or the rho and theta, but not all four methods, because including all of these makes the implementation bulky. The clients can always do the transformation. True or false? No, that is false. Because these methods conceptually belong to the class, not a client. In addition, the existence of these methods permits changing the implementation and possibly enables more efficient operation. In a class that implements an immutable ADT, the representation should never change after the constructor is exited. This is false, because benevolent side effects may change the concrete representation without affecting the abstract value. When the user passes an argument that violates the precondition, it is helpful to throw an exception and to document this behavior in the throws class of the specification. True or false? The answer is false. Why? Because it is helpful to throw the exception but not to document it in the throw clause. That would make the specification inconsistent, as it would specify behavior when the precondition is not satisfied. You may answer like this. At a site x, you may recall that at this call site xy. This is a specific question. So a call, say, at some site x.fy, it is possible for a value x to violate the method precondition of f. Is it possible? Yes. Because suppose that there are two different implementations of C1 and C2 of a given ADT, and the implementations have different representation variants. If the violations of abstraction barrier for client code to intermix objects of type C1 and C2 in computation, or to intermix them in collections such as list, the answer is false. It is a violation of the abstraction barrier for the code of class C1 to make calls against an object of class C2. True or false? The answer is false. Showing a customer a mock-up of your user interface is one good way to get feedback while gathering requirements. False. Okay. For an announcement within your team, email is more appropriate than making the announcement during a meeting. Is it true or false? The answer is true, because meetings should be reserved for discussion, two-way communication rather than announcement, which are simply one way. When evaluating a user interface via a paper prototyping, the method should have a crisp, professional appearance to aid in obtaining good feedback. False. Cohesion refers to the element in the same module, same element, whereas coupling refers to the element in different module. This is absolutely true. We want strong cohesion and least coupling. Suppose you are able to find the true revealing subdomains for a software system, and you design unit tests for it accordingly. Later, if you change your implementation, it is also necessary to update your test so that they still cover the revealing subdomains which may have changed. The answer is true, absolutely true. Why? Because a revealing subdomain corresponds to a sequence of choices made by the program. So it is a feature of the implementation rather than the specification. Implementation. So the existing unit test would need to be supplemented to consider the revealing subdomains of the new implementation. When designing tests, if partitions are chosen perfectly, partitioning, there is no point to test boundary value near the edges of the partition. Is it true or false? The answer is true. Because if partitions are chosen perfectly is very important word. Otherwise, you need to go for the boundary value analysis. Glass box, white box, or structural testing. Glass box tests designed for one implementation are valid to use when testing another implementation. This is true. For one implementation are valid for another implementation. This is also true. In an implementation of the singleton pattern, there is no constructor. False. There is a constructor, but it is private. So we have taken certain question that is MCQ type and true and false. We'll be taking short answers just now. Thank you so much.